Today we have a sensational dessert that went viral all over social media. They were invented by Lafayette Grand Cafe and Bakery under the name The Supreme, which later went viral as the New York Rolls. In this video, we will prepare them with 4 delicious flavors: coconut, ruby chocolate, pistachio, and dark chocolate. The key to making delicious New York rolls, like any other pastry, starts of course with the dough. You can essentially use store-bought for this, but if you care at all about your taste buds, here's how to make your own. Let's start by adding 500 grams or 4 cups of flour into a bowl of a stand mixer, to which we want to add a half a tablespoon of salt, 60 grams or 3/4 of a cup of sugar, and 10 grams or a 1/3 tablespoon of yeast. Make a small well in the middle of the dry ingredients and then add 100 ml or a half a cup of cold milk along with 160 ml or 2/3 of a cup of cold water. Then set the mixer on a low setting and mix for about 3 minutes, slowly adding 50 grams of butter in small chunks, one at a time. So it's important that the water and milk are cold because yeast activates at warm temperatures and we only want to activate it at a later stage. So once 3 minutes have passed, increase the speed to a medium and let the mixer do its job for about 6 to 8 minutes. At this point, we are pretty much making croissant dough. Fun fact, croissants are actually not French. They were created in Vienna and later introduced to France. That's why most flaky pastries, just like the croissant, fall under the category of viennoiserie. So now that we have learned a random fact, let's take out the dough and shape it into a ball. Then place the ball into a bowl and cover it with a plastic wrap, making sure the wrap comes in contact with the dough. Let it rest for 15 minutes at room temperature, and let's move on to shaping our butter. So for this, prepare a square pocket of parchment paper that is 20 centimeters or 8 inches by 20 centimeters or 8 inches. If you don't have any parchment paper, don't worry, a plastic wrap or a zip bag will work too. Then place 240 grams or 1 cup of softened butter in the middle of the parchment paper and use a rolling pin to create the desired shape. Ideally, you want to use butter with a higher fat percentage than 80 for a better tasting pastry, so use that if you have any. Next, refrigerate the shaped butter for 2 hours or until it's hardened. So while we wait on our butter to chill, let's move on to our dough. Roll out the dough to shape a rectangle of 30 centimeters or 12 inches by 20 centimeters or 8 inches. Carefully wrap it in plastic wrap and then place it in the fridge for about 2 hours. So once the dough has chilled for 2 hours, we can move on to the next step. Take out the chilled dough and roll it until it reaches 40 centimeters or 16 inches in length. Then place the chilled butter in the middle and close off both ends, making sure every seam is completely sealed. Next, we want to make what is called a double turn. To do this, simply turn the dough 90 degrees and roll it out again until it reaches 60 centimeters or 24 inches. Then close off the ends and press a rolling pin firmly on the seam, and then lastly, fold the dough once again in half over the newly created seam. At this point, we want to make more folds, but if we handle our dough anymore, we risk melting the butter inside. We want the butter to melt in the oven when baking and not before. So, place the dough in plastic wrap and refrigerate for another 2 hours. Once the dough has chilled once again, lightly dust your working surface with flour and place the dough on there. This time we want to perform what is called a simple turn, for which we need to roll out our dough one last time and perform a L fold. To do this, just brush off any flour off the dough and fold one end towards the middle and then the other end over the already folded side. It's important to have no flour on the dough so it can stick together. Then place it once again in plastic wrap for one last time and refrigerate for 2 hours. Then on to the last step for our dough, which is the shaping. For this, lightly dust your dough with flour and roll it out until it reaches 4 mm thick, or when it forms a rectangle that is 40 centimeters or 16 inches by 60 centimeters or 24 inches. Then trim the edges to create a perfect rectangle, and then press one edge firmly with a rolling pin and brush the length with a bit of water. Next, gently roll the dough tightly into a log. Also make sure to brush off any flour hanging onto the dough. Once we have rolled the dough completely, let it firm up again in the fridge for about 20 minutes. In the meantime, we can prepare our biscuit cutters. Butter the insides of the biscuit cutters with a diameter of preferably 12 centimeters or 5 inches and a height of 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches. After 20 minutes, remove the dough from the fridge and then trim off both edges. Then we need to measure out perfectly the sections we need to cut from the dough. To do this, just cut the amount of the height of your biscuit cutters, which in my case is 4 cm or 1.5 inches, so make small incisions at every 4 cm or 1.5 inches, and once measured out, simply cut out the rolls. For this, I like to use a piece of kitchen twine because it makes perfect slices without mushing the dough. Once you have all your rolls, place the pieces of dough in the center of each biscuit cutter to rise for 2.5 hours at room temperature. And then that gives us just enough time to work on our fillings. To start it off, whisk together 3 egg yolks, 45 grams of sugar, and lastly 25 grams of cornstarch until it's fully incorporated. And then in a separate saucepan, bring 350 ml or 1 cup of milk to a boil. Once the milk starts to boil, take it off the heat and then slowly pour it into the egg mixture while whisking it continuously. And then pour the mixture back into the saucepan and cook it over a medium heat while stirring it constantly until it thickens to the desired consistency. Once the base mixture has thickened, divide it equally into 4 different containers. To create the first filling, add 10 grams or 0.1 cups of pistachio paste, and then whisk continuously until it's fully incorporated. For the second filling, add 20 grams or 0.15 cups of dark chocolate to one container, and then for the third one, add the same amount of ruby chocolate for a fruity berry flavor. For the fourth and final filling, add some shaved coconut, and that's it. Then cover each container with a plastic wrap and then refrigerate it for about 2 hours, giving the fillings time to set and cool off. If you decide to make only one of the 4 flavors, just multiply the chocolate or pistachio paste by 4 and you are good to go. And now it's time to check on our dough. We're looking for it to have tripled in size before we move on. If it's ready, cover the dough with parchment paper and place a baking sheet on top. And then preheat your oven to 175 degrees Celsius and bake the dough for about 15 to 20 minutes. After 15 minutes have passed, flip the pastries over and continue baking it for another 15 to 20 minutes until they are perfectly golden brown. And while these are sitting in the oven, we can prepare the final piece of our New York rolls, the ganache. We'll be making 4 different flavors to match each filling we have created earlier. So for the chocolate flavor, melt 40 grams of dark chocolate and add a teaspoon of coffee. Then repeat this process for the white chocolate and ruby chocolate using the same amount for each. And then for the pistachio flavor, simply mix 20 grams of pistachio paste into a bowl. Next, bring 160 grams or 0.7 cups of heavy whipping cream to a boil. Once it starts to boil, slowly pour in a quarter of the whipping cream to each bowl of chocolate and mix until it's fully incorporated. Once they are ready, let them cool off for a bit and let's take our pastries out of the oven to appreciate their beauty. Now, to fill these New York rolls, it's quite simple. Make small incisions in 2 to 3 places on each pastry and begin filling them with each of the flavors we've made. Take your time to make sure each pastry is evenly filled with the delicious fillings we made. Next and lastly, it's time to decorate the ganache on top. Remember to use the respective ganache for each fillings we made. You could essentially decorate the rolls however you want, but I prefer filling a third of the pastry with the icing and then spread it evenly with the help of a butter knife. Once the ganache is on, top it off with some chocolate chips and nuts for an extra special touch. Repeat this process for all of your New York rolls while I take you through a quick history lesson about these pastries. So as I said before, the New York rolls are a new phenomenon, so what history would they even have? But you see, New York rolls have actually been around since the 13th century, and maybe even have roots in ancient Egypt. Let me explain why. So in the year 1683, the Ottoman Empire was waging a huge war against Vienna. The Ottomans were laying siege to the city, trying to tunnel their way under the walls to breach its defenses. Vienna was struggling to hold out against the Ottoman forces, and it looked as if the city would eventually fall. Meanwhile, in a small bakery in Vienna, a man named Franz Kolschitzky was awake early in the morning to start preparing his breads and pastries. The man, who formerly lived in the Ottoman Empire, heard strange noises coming from outside his bakery. So he went outside to see what all the noise was about. But soon he realized that the Ottomans were digging a tunnel under the city walls. Shocked with his discovery, Kolschitzky quickly alerted the Viennese army, who were able to pinpoint the Ottomans under the tunnels and use explosives to eventually kill them. To commemorate this victory over the Ottomans, Kolschitzky decided to create a new pastry. For this, he rolled out dough into a crescent shape which resembled the crescent moon of the Ottoman flag. The new pastry was named Kipferl, which is actually the German name for crescent. But the pastry itself was already around since the 13th century, but now gained a new shape. Over time, the recipe for Kipferl evolved and bakers began using richer, more buttery dough, and this helped to create the flaky layered texture that we associate with the croissants today. The crescent shape of these pastries also became more pronounced and recognizable as the pastry's popularity spread throughout Europe. But it wasn't until much later, in the 19th century, that the term croissant began to be used to describe the pastry in France. Today, that same croissant was taken by Lafayette and has turned into what we now call the New York roll, maybe even creating history by themselves. So, now you know. Kipferl turned into croissants, and croissants turned into New York rolls, going from Austria to France and eventually to America. And there you have it, beautiful and delicious New York rolls that are ready to serve. To eat these, you could rip it apart, cut it in half, or simply take a big bite out of it. No matter how you eat it, don't forget to give this video a like and potentially subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more recipes like this. Also, let me know in the comments what you think about these New York rolls. Are they worth the hype? And more importantly,